Hi everyone, my name is Tony. I'm a recent graduate from UC Riverside and an incoming medical student at the UC Riverside School of Medicine. I wanted to make this video today to talk to anyone who might be considering UCR for their undergraduate degree, considering transferring to UCR, or even considering transferring out of UCR. I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, reasons for choosing UCR and staying at UCR, and some advice for anyone that's choosing colleges right now, and especially for pre-med students. This video will have sections, so if you don't want to hear me blabber, you can feel free to skip to any of the sections that you're actually interested in. Without further ado, let's get started. A little bit about me. I'm class of 2020 for high school, so I was applying, and it was ultimately the pandemic year. But I had applied to pretty much all the UCs and a lot of the CSUs. I live in SoCal right now, so I knew I wanted to stay in SoCal or California for my college. And I had applied, like I said, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, and I didn't get any of them. I did get into UCR, and that was pretty much the only school that I got into out of the schools in California. I think it's really hard if you're the first person in your family to go through the process of applying to college to really know how competitive it actually is. I did football and like lacrosse, but I didn't know you have to actually do like clubs and extracurriculars and volunteering and all that stuff. I had like an okay GPA, but yeah, it's safe to say I wasn't necessarily the most competitive person, but I didn't know it at the time. And so I was pretty upset not getting into a lot of the schools that I wanted to get into. To compound that, I'm sure a lot of you are in the same situation that I was in right now. And you see your friends getting in, and you think about all the 4 years of schooling you did, and you're like, dang, this sucks. And I definitely can attest to that. It's not fun. But the one thing that I can say is that you ultimately can make it work wherever you go. And I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But for the time being, yeah, it definitely does suck, especially until you actually do get into college and you start doing, the admitted students days, orientation. It's gonna sting for a little bit for sure. But you can make it work wherever you go. So for me, UCR was the school that I chose to go to for reasons that I'll talk about a little bit later in the video as well. But I went to UCR. The first year was online because it was the pandemic. I had a bad experience with a professor, to put it lightly, which made me want to transfer out of UCR. So I had applied to UCLA, UC Irvine, and UC Santa Barbara as a second year to do a UC to UC transfer, and I got into all three, but I ultimately decided to stay at UCR. If high school Tony, he knew that we had stayed at UCR over UCLA, he'd probably be pretty upset, but at the time I loved UCR and I knew it was absolutely the right choice. So I'll talk about those reasons a little bit later in this video. But looking back on it, I definitely made the right decision. At the time, I loved UCR, I loved the school, I loved the location, I loved the people, so it was a pretty easy choice for me to want to ultimately stay at UCR. But as a third year at UCR, I applied to the UCR School of Medicine's Early Assurance Program, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. I got in, and so I'm gonna be a medical student at UCR, and I finished my degree in biology in December of 2023, which was 2 quarters early than where I should have. So that's kind of my story. All in all, like I said, the most important thing is that you can make it work wherever you go. And so I definitely made it work at UCR. There's pros and cons to every decision that you're going to make. And so I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of UCR in the next section of this video. So I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why I chose UCR in the first place, why I stayed at UCR and didn't do that UC to UC transfer, and some of the pros and cons of UCR throughout that. So number one, I'll talk about affordability and social mobility. So UCR is a really affordable school, especially if you are a California resident. You'll be getting that California resident tuition, so that takes a lot of the burden off financially. Additionally, UCR is unique because they offer a lot of scholarships and grants to students. And so a lot of financial aid is available. And so that's a big reason why a lot of people end up choosing to go to UCR over schools like UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, et cetera, et cetera. You'll be getting a lot of money to go to UCR. It definitely lessens the load financially. Also, UCR really prides itself on social mobility. So they take a lot of students who are, maybe considered lower income, and they get them a really high quality degree, really high quality experiences, and ultimately land them a really good job in whatever workforce they decide to go into. So that's another really important thing to consider, is that you'll be supported if you are that type of student. Additionally, if you are a student who might be undocumented, or like I said, you maybe are coming in from a lower income background, or maybe you're the first person in your family to actually go to college, UCR has a lot of programs to assist you and support you. Definitely more than a lot of the other UCs. And you'll definitely feel more supported as that type of student as opposed to somewhere like UC Irvine or UCLA or UC Berkeley or UC San Diego. You'll also be surrounded by a lot of people who are like-minded like you. And so it's a really great community to be a part of. There's definitely less clickiness as opposed to somewhere like UC Irvine. Not that, UC Irvine, UCLA, et cetera, aren't great schools. It's just that there are pros and cons, like I said, to each decision. The next thing I'll talk about is location. So UCR is located in the Inland Empire. And so this is considered a medically underserved region, which mentioning that's important for reasons I'll elaborate on later. But UCR is also, kind of in the desert. So it's definitely warm, it's definitely dry. For me, I like that type of environment. I enjoy warm weather, so that was a plus for me coming in. And something that I've really enjoyed is the weather's, for me, is good pretty much all year round. It does get to like 100, 110 in the summer. So, maybe not that much, but, if you are someone that enjoys that warm weather, that's important to consider as well. In addition, for location, UCR is pretty close to a lot of different things you might want to go to in SoCal. So it's around an hour from Disneyland, an hour from the beach, about 90 minutes or so from San Diego, about 90 minutes from Ventura County, about an hour from LA. So it's pretty located centrally for a lot of those different things. So if you do want to go to San Diego for a weekend, or you want to go to Los Angeles for an event, it's pretty easy to get to from UCR. If you want to go to Coachella or Palm Springs, it's really close to that as well. If you want to go to Vegas, if you're into that type of thing, it's relatively close to Vegas as well. I think it's about 3 or so hours. And so it's located centrally to a lot of great things. Some downsides with location, or maybe pluses depending on where you're coming from. It is kind of more of a city, more urban environment. So for me, I came from a suburb. And a lot of people will say there's not a lot to do in Riverside, but coming from a kind of a suburb, there's definitely a lot to do for me. So I really have enjoyed the change of pace with the city. There's nightclubs if you're, again, into that sort of thing. There's a lot of cool different restaurants, a lot of local places. Not a lot of malls unless you drive around 30 minutes to Rancho Cucamonga. But, there's definitely a change of pace if you are looking for that kind of city environment. Next, I'll talk about competitiveness. And so I'll talk about this a little bit more in the pre-med section as well. But UCR is definitely a less competitive environment than schools like UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's a little bit easier to stand out in your classes if that's something you want to do. Make connections with professors and TAs. I've heard stories from my friends at UCLA and UC Berkeley about, registrations being sabotaged or wrong answers for homework being given out in an attempt to, improve the curve. But you won't find that at UCR. It's definitely a less competitive environment. If you're someone that's looking for that, obviously it's a plus. If you're someone like you're Tom Brady and you thrive on negativity and competitiveness, then you should take that into account as well. I will also say another benefit of UCR is that it's definitely a smaller campus. So you can walk from one point to the other in around 20 to 25 minutes. And when I say one point to the other, I mean like the farthest possible like dorming locations all the way to the farthest possible parking lot location. It's around a 25-minute walk. So that definitely helps, as opposed to somewhere like UC Irvine where you gotta take a bus to get to place, or you have to go to, or you're looking at a place like UCLA, again, you have to take a bus to get to some places. And with that smaller campus comes a smaller campus feel. So if you do decide to be pre-med, you get to know a lot of people that are in the same classes, that are in the same extracurricular opportunities. Same thing if you're in a community, an ethnic or a cultural community. It's a smaller campus feel, so you'll get to know your friends and peers a lot better. One more thing I'll mention as well is something you should consider, is how new the campus is, or how many investments are going into the campus. UCR does get less money than other schools in the UC system, partly because of funding, partly because of less notable alumni. But there are still significant additions being made to the UCR campus. There's a new business building, there's a new study place on campus for students, new medical school. And so there's a lot of investments being done at UCR right now. Next, I'll talk about opportunities for non-pre-med students. So, Inland Empire is about an hour or so away from the Orange County and Los Angeles County. And so there aren't a ton of recruiters for companies coming to UCR. Not to say that you can't make it work no matter where you go. For example, I have had friends that have been computer science majors and have gotten jobs straight out of college from Google and Raytheon. But you do have to look for those opportunities a little bit more, as opposed to a school like UCLA or UC Irvine or UC San Diego. So next I'm going to talk about pre-med students. Some of the things you should be considering when choosing college if you are pre-med. Some of the reasons UCR ticks all those boxes, and some of the reasons why I went to UCR originally and stayed at UCR. The biggest thing I'll talk about and first thing I'll talk about is having a medical school attached to the campus. So this has a lot of benefits. A lot of medical schools give preferential treatment to their undergraduates who are looking to go to their school, and that same thing applies at UCR. There's two different ways for UCR students to get to the UCR School of Medicine. It's a little bit confusing, but you basically go through the Thomas Hyder program, and there's 2 days to get into the Thomas Hyder program. Number one is applying through the regular cycle, and you apply through AMCAS, which is basically the common application for medical schools, or you can go through the early assurance program, which is what I did. Ultimately, UCR currently saves 24 seats for UCR students to get into their medical school. And so when you apply, for example, through the regular cycle, there might be 6,000 total applicants to the UCR School of Medicine. But if you are a UCR student, you won't be put in the pool of that 6,000 students. You'll be put in a much smaller pool depending on how many people apply from UCR. There's also the Thomas Hyder Early Assurance Program. So again, those are seats reserved specifically for UCR students who are currently at UCR or 1 year removed from graduating to get into the UCR School of Medicine. You don't have to pay an application fee to apply, and you also know around 6 to 8 months earlier that you'll be in medical school than the other peers in your class. So for me, I heard about my medical school in around June of this year, or last year. And so for me, for example, I knew about me getting into medical school June of 2023, and I'm class of 2024. So a lot of the peers in my class are still finding out whether or not they're getting into medical school. So not only do we have a significant financial burden lifted off of you, significant stress is lifted off of you as well. So you have time to do extracurricular opportunities you really enjoy doing, which is what I've been doing. You also get opportunities to vacation and travel and spend time with family before medical school starts. Medical school is really grueling, it's really tough. And so you definitely need that time off, which is a benefit of the early assurance program. There are a lot of programs that are designed for your undergraduate degree to help you. So they have these things called pathway programs, and these are basically your golden ticket into medical school. And so there's a lot of different programs you can do in these pathway programs. There's mentorship programs, service opportunities, clinical volunteering opportunities, but you'll be basically connected with UCR School of Medicine faculty and doing really rewarding work. And so if you excel in these pathway programs, it really gives you a leg up when applying to not just the UCR School of Medicine, but medical school in general. One thing I'll talk about in regards to UCR is the fact that Riverside is a medically underserved region. If you are someone that's interested in serving in a medically underserved region for whatever reason, UCR is a great place to start. It's an absolutely wonderful community of people, and you get to be involved in a lot of really great opportunities, such as free medical clinics, organizations on campus that provide free food, etc., etc. And so if you are someone that's interested in doing that, UCR has a lot of opportunities for you. One more thing I'll mention regarding UCR is research opportunities and competitiveness. So I talked about competitiveness a little bit earlier, but again, it's definitely less competitive than other schools. It's really helpful in getting research opportunities. UCR has a lot of different research programs, such as the RISE program, that are really beneficial. It's pretty easy to make connections with professors to get research opportunities, which is important for medical school. UCR is a UC school, obviously, so it's primarily a research institution. So those opportunities are plentiful, and it's really not that hard to get involved in research, whether you want to do STEM research, political science, economics, history research. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and those opportunities are everywhere. UCR also has a lot of really great clubs on campus. So there's around 500 student organizations on campus, from cultural clubs to service clubs to religious clubs. So a lot of really great ways to get involved. The process for starting a student organization at UCR is also really easy, and they do a really great job of supporting student organizations. So you will have a lot of success when trying to do this, and it helps build out your resume for medical school. Outside of clubs, there's a lot of opportunities in the surrounding area to get experience for medical school. There's multiple different hospitals, including Kaiser Permanente and Riverside Community Hospital, Loma Linda, Arrowhead Regional, to do things like scribing or being an MA, doing phlebotomy, doing regular volunteering through something like the Cope Health Scholars Program. There's a lot of really great opportunities in the area, and they're really accessible. You compare and contrast this to somewhere like UCLA or UC Berkeley or UC Irvine, where it's a little bit less accessible to get into these clinical volunteering or clubs. A lot of the times there's a lot of pretty heavy applications. When at UCR, that's not really the case. There are applications for some things, but generally, I would say that it's definitely less competitive. You'll get experiences going to UCR that you can't possibly get at other schools that'll make your application for medical school stand out. Also, UCR does a really great job of supporting their pre-med students, not only through the pathway programs, but they have a health professions advising center on campus. Not all schools have this, but UCR does a really great job of supporting their students through this. They have both peer mentors and advisors that will help you through your medical school application process. They have workshops, they have social media content. So ultimately, I took a lot of these things into account when I was initially applying to college, and when I wanted to maybe consider transferring out of UCR. Ultimately, I didn't decide to transfer out of UCR. So when I was applying to UCR, part of my decision was because, we were in a medically underserved region, and that's something that aligned with my personal values. I also knew that there were a lot of opportunities, like all the things I mentioned before, to help support me throughout my journey to medical school. Ultimately, when I was thinking of doing that UC to UC transfer, part of the reason I didn't was because I really loved what I was doing so much through pathway programs, through volunteering. I really did enjoy the work I was doing, the people who I had met throughout the way, both community members and my peers at the school. So if you are someone that's thinking of doing that UC to UC transfer, really consider whether or not the grass is going to be greener on the other side, especially if you are a pre-med student. At UCR, the opportunities are plentiful. There's a lot of them. That's not always the case at the other schools. So unless you have a really good reason for wanting to transfer, for example, you have a family member that you want to be closer to, or medical reason or something like that, really consider, again, is the grass going to be greenner on the other side? Are the opportunities I'm going to get at somewhere like UCLA or UC Berkeley going to be better than what I'm currently getting at UCR or what I could possibly get? In my opinion, I think the answer is no. And that's, a lot of the reason why I stayed at UCR, along with, again, I think you'll find the work that you're doing really fulfilling at UCR. Ultimately, there's a lot of things you should take into account when you are applying to college. I'm not getting paid by UCR. They haven't paid me a dime to talk about any of this stuff. And so there's definitely some cons to UCR, some things that I mentioned before. But if you are someone that's in that position where, maybe your college application cycle didn't work out the way that you wanted to, you might be feeling like, oh, well, I have to go to UCR now. You shouldn't be thinking in the terms of, I have to go to UCR, more so I get to go to UCR. It really is a great school. And I think that there are a lot of benefits to going to it, as opposed to somewhere like UCLA or UC Irvine or UC Berkeley or UC San Diego. One thing I've learned throughout my time is that if you're willing to put in the work, you can make it work. Whether you're going to UCLA or UC Riverside or UC Irvine or UC San Diego, if you are ready to put in a lot of effort, put in a lot of time, you will be able to find success. As someone who gave up the opportunity to go to UCLA or UC Santa Barbara or UC Irvine in favor of UCR, I definitely say that I made the right decision for me. Not everyone will be in the same circumstance that I'm in, so definitely evaluate based on your own preferences, things that you value, things that you want to do in the future. But if you are in the situation where you are considering UCR, I definitely recommend doing it. UCR is a great school. I've had a lot of fun there. I've met a lot of really great people, and I'm sure that you'll be in the same boat that I was in, finishing your college career and being satisfied with the decisions that you made. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate all your time. And I don't know if I'll make any more videos, but we'll see what happens.